Hey everybody, Shawn Powers here. Now, it's no secret that I do not love SELinux. The last video I think I titled something like, I hate SELinux, join me. But part of the reason I'm so frustrated with SELinux is that there are alternatives like AppArmor, which is what this video is about, that I think while it may not be quite as robust, it does the same sort of things with a saner, easier to understand approach, in my opinion. So we're going to look at AppArmor. Now, the objectives for Linux Plus are not super elaborate when it comes to what we're going to do with AppArmor, especially when comparatively the SELinux stuff, like there's just a ton of it. So I'm going to elaborate a little bit more on AppArmor than they do. They just say application permissions. But basically the thing is AppArmor, rather than defining on every file in the system what is allowed to access it, there are profiles for individual programs, and it defines what they are allowed to access. And so it kind of reverses it. Rather than like the files being defined with special contexts, AppArmor just defines a profile. What is the program itself allowed to access? And that makes more sense to me. Like I said, it may not be as robust even, but the same sort of individualized security structures can be accomplished with AppArmor, and you'll see it's a lot easier to understand. Before we dig into it though, I have to stop and just say thank you so much to my Patreon supporters who have supported me, even though the video production the past month or so has been really rough. Thank you so much. And especially for I have two new top tier supporters, Money to the Max and Trey. Thank you so much. And I actually still have stuff that I need to send to you physically. So please don't give up on me, I promise. But thank you, all of my Patreon supporters who make it possible for me to release these videos for free. If this has been beneficial and you want to find out more about supporting me on Patreon, there's a link in the description. But I just wanted to stop and say thank you. I don't say it enough. And so that's what this has been. Anyway, when we look at AppArmor, again, I think it's so much simpler than SELinux. And like I said, it defines the other way. You take each individual program and define what it is allowed to handle. And we can look at profiles in the etc AppArmor.d folder. And in here, there's going to be, there's some folders that we'll touch on a little bit, but each individual file here, these green ones, the way you specify a particular program is, let's say we wanted to make rules for the man program, right? If we were to say which man, it's going to give us the path to where the man executable is. For manual, it's user bin man. And so to create a profile for that, we look at usr.bin.man. So the way we specify that this is a profile to apply to this executable is basically you start at the root, so you don't put a dot at the beginning, but you do user dot instead of slash, bin dot instead of slash, and then the executable name. And that ties this profile to that binary on your system. Let's look at this really quickly. So sudo vi user bin man, just as an example to see what a profile looks like. And there's a whole bunch of things you can specify that it has access to or not, and then specifically what kind of access it has. Now, we're not going to cover all sorts of these things, but this is basically like permissions that it has for individual files on the system, like Unix ports. Like what capabilities does it have? Can it do set UID, set GID, which we're going to cover, I think, in the next video. You can deny or allow things. So you can deny it to do a DAC override, blah, 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 blah. There's all these things. We're not going to get too deep into it. So don't worry too much about what all this means. But what I want to show you is at the very bottom, I think this one has it. So right here, now this looks like it's commented out, but this is how you include a file. So it says include anything in local called user bin man. So basically you can have this override file that you put in local. And the reason you would want to do that is, let's say there's a profile that comes with the system, like this man page or this man profile was installed by Ubuntu. You wanted to override something. If you could change that file in the AppArmor.d folder, you could change that. But then if there's an update, it might overwrite what you changed. And so you can override settings if you create a similarly named file in the local directory inside there. If you remember, if we look in that directory where we are, let's get out of this file. See, there's a folder called local. I don't think there's anything in there by default. Maybe there is. Local. Oh yeah, there's a bunch of stuff in there. Oh, in fact, there's a man page file in there. Let's look at that. So sudo vi local user bin man. It's empty, so there's nothing being overridden. But if we put a setting in here, it would override the stock profile that is installed for the man page program, the man executable. And so the thing that we need to be aware of, though, is if you make a change here, but there's a deny in the original, when it gets parsed, it parses all of the allow commands and all of the allow commands in the local. And then it does all the deny commands and all the deny commands in local. So you can run into this problem where, let's say something is denied in the original profile and you want to allow it. But if you put allow in this local override file, it's not going to override that because it does all of the allows first in both the profile and the local override file, and then it does all the denies. So it's going to allow it, and then it's going to do the denies. It's going to find that deny in the profile, and it will set it to deny even if you have an allow in the local, because again, it does all of the allows and then all of the denies. So if you really need to undeny something, you're going to have to change that original profile. I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit confusing and not something you have to do, which I think is a really valid point. While I usually have to make drastic changes to SELinux or just disable it altogether to make some programs work, I've never had to disable AppArmor at all. It comes with sane settings. Usually things just work. It's pretty nondescript. It doesn't seem to interrupt with stuff. Again, unless there's a profile specifically for a program isn't confined by AppArmor. So yeah, anyway, that's how you override stuff with local. Just be aware of that allow and deny thing where it does all of the allows and then it goes through and does all of the denies. So you can't override a profile deny with a local override allow. Now, just because a profile is present doesn't mean that it's being enforced. There's basically 3 different modes that you'll see an AppArmor profile in. It can be either in enforced, meaning if it breaks the rules, the program is going to fail. It can be in complain mode, which means that it will still work, but it's going to write in the log, he shouldn't have done that. That program was bad. It broke the rules, but it's still going to allow it to take place. And then disable is where it just doesn't even look, right? Disabled, the profile is there on the file system, but it's not active. So disable is that mode. Now, there are a couple other modes. There's like a kill mode and unconfined mode. We're not going to look at those because they're not terribly common, but there are a couple other modes. Usually though, we just either have it's enforced or it's in complain mode or it's disabled. Okay, so those are the 3 main ones. That's what we're going to look at, and we can see what each profile its current status is in using the AA-status program. So here in our system, I'm going to do sudo AA status. AA stands for AppArmor, so AA-status, and it's going to dump all this stuff out on the screen. Let's scroll to the top of the output here. So there are 47 profiles in total. 39 of those profiles are in enforce mode, which means they're actively stopping the program from breaking its rules. And you'll see the user bin man program is one of those programs that is currently being enforced. If we scroll down, it's going to say there are 8 profiles that are in complain mode. And that means that these programs, these 8 programs here, there's a profile and it's active, but if it breaks the rules defined in the profile, it's going to keep going. It's just going to write to the AppArmor logs that it broke the rules that it was supposed to keep in track. And then I did say that there's some other modes, but again, nothing is in these modes. We have 6 processes have profiles. Oh, and there are some processes. It's saying which ones are actually currently being enforced, like the programs are running, because you'll see the man program is not running because I'm not looking at a man page, but these are actually programs that are running. So when it says processes are in enforce mode, that means it's defined and also they're running. And so they're currently being enforced. All right, hopefully that makes sense. But that's AA status, which shows us what everything is. But let's say we wanted to change it. So the man program was in enforce mode, but let's say we wanted to do sudo aa-complain user bin man. Okay, now it's in complain mode. So if we do sudo aa status, that should have moved. We should see it no longer in, so 9 profiles are in complain mode. That is one of them. So the man program is now in complain mode, meaning if it breaks the rules, it'll still work, but it's in complain mode. And we can do the same to disable. We can do sudo aa disable user bin man. And now it doesn't matter, man isn't being tracked or enforced at all. But let's put it back to where it was. Sudo aa enforce user bin man. And now it's back in enforce mode. And I guess I did jump the card a little bit here. If you want to see if AppArmor is enabled at all, you can do sudo aa enabled. And it's going to say, oh, yeah. Yeah, it's enabled. It usually is enabled by default when you install Ubuntu. Even the desktop mode, usually AppArmor is enabled. We could disable it using systemctl. It's a service, so we could do sudo systemctl stop AppArmor. And now it's stopped. So if we do, is it enabled? We're going to say it's enabled, but it's not currently running because we stopped the service. So it is important to realize that. And then sudo systemctl start AppArmor. And now it's back to running again. So it's just a standard system thing. Even though it is kernel level stuff and there's kernel modules loaded, you can start and stop the service using systemctl. And honestly, that's about all you need to know when it comes to using AppArmor on your system. But if you want to have some more profiles, if you install the AppArmor -profiles, or maybe it's just AA profiles, I don't remember the name of it. Look in your package manager. It's either called AppArmor -profiles or AA profiles. There's going to be a bunch of other profiles for programs on your system. Like I think one of the default ones that comes in that package is for user bin ping, to make sure that ping doesn't get compromised and do things it's not supposed to be able to do. But I do kind of want to show you how simply you could create something on your own. So again, this is kind of above and beyond what you need for Linux Plus, but AppArmor is kind of cool and kind of simple to work with. So let's say we had a program and we wanted to create our own profile for what it can and can't do. So I'm here on the command line. This is just a normal out of the box system, right? And I want to confine, or I want to install a profile for let's do the SS program. Like SS is kind of like netstat. It's the new version of netstat. And so if we do SS-tuna, again, if you've watched my videos, that just makes me think of a boat like the SS Tuna. Anyway, SS-tuna will show us like what ports are currently listening and active and have connected sessions and stuff. So that's not pertaining to this video, but it's a program I use quite a bit. So let's say we wanted to create a profile. Now we could use a program called SS gen. I gotta be root. Sudo SS gen prof, and it's not SS, it's AA. I got SS on the brain. We could do sudo AA-gen prof, and then the binary that we wanted to create a profile for. In our case, it would be user bin SS, because that's where it's located. So which SS? User bin SS. And this would go through the logs to see like what it may or may not have accessed, and would try to create a sane default for the SS program, which is nice, but I kind of want to go a step back further and create like a blank profile for it. Okay, which a blank profile is going to basically give it no permissions to do anything, right? It's just going to be locked out. So to do that, I'm going to use a program called AA Easy Prof. All right, so we're going to make a profile. Well, it'll just print on the screen. So AA Easy Prof. You may need to install this from your distribution if you don't have it. And I'm going to do it for the program user bin SS. Now it's just going to dump the profile to the screen, but I just want to show you. So this is basically, oh, look, it fit exactly on my screen here. So this is what it looks like to have a completely blank profile. Like this is like an empty one, right? This is going to allow it to do nothing at all. And I want to save this as a file. So I'm going to do the same command, and I'm just going to redirect the output into a program or a file called usr.bin.ss, because again, that's how you specify that's the binary. Now this is just in my home directory. So I'm going to move this. So sudo move this program, or this like blank template profile that we created into etc AppArmor.d. And now then I'm going to say sudo aa enforce user bin ss, or I could actually, I think I can do it that way, and I can also specify the profile. So etc AppArmor.d user bin ss. Okay, now it's in enforce mode, which means we've basically broken SS. Now, how can we prove that? Let's do ss-tuna, which worked a minute ago. And now it's going to be like, whoa, 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 I can't do anything. You have limited everything I can do to basically nothing. And this can be really confusing. So like, okay, what do I do now that, I see it can't really do anything? I can't connect to the sockets. I can't do any of the stuff. Well, you may remember that complain mode will allow it to happen and still write it to the log file. Enforce mode doesn't let it happen, but it still writes to the log file for AppArmor when something tries to break the rules. So our log file currently has the broken rules that SS tried to accomplish. And there's a really cool tool that will allow you to tweak the profile for a particular application that has broken the rules. And so it'll just walk us right through all the things that it's trying to do and let us know or ask us, do you want to let it do that? So let's do that. So back here, these are where all the errors just happened. We're going to use the tool. So sudo aa log prof. And what this does is it's going to tweak our profile based on the log entries that were just made. So press enter and it goes through and says, okay, the profile for user bin ss, it tried to, we can kind of see what it said here. Okay, proc star Unix, it needs to be able to read files in this file system because it tried to access this particular file. Do we want to allow it? So if I press A, because I want to allow it, okay, it did that. Now the next one, it needs to have raw access to this proc file system as well. Do I want to allow it? I'm going to say allow. And now it needs access to see the proc file system again, which is a virtual file system that shows us current running conditions on the kernel, etc. To the net UDP file here, it needs read access. Do we want to allow that? I'm going to say A again for allow. And same thing with TCP. I'm going to say A allow. And lastly, well, I don't know if it's lastly or not, but next it says this proxys next IPv4, IP local port, blah, blah, blah range it wants to have read access to. Should we do that? I'm going to say allow. And now it wants to have access to the network, to see the net link of our network. Do I want to allow that? You can see where I'm going. I'm going to say allow to all the things it's trying to do. Allow. And now, okay, that did all, it found all the rules it was trying to break, and we've allowed all of those. And now it says, do you want to save the changes? And that will actually save those allow things directly into the profile that we made, that blank one that we made with AA EasyProf. So I'm going to say S for save changes. It wrote the updated profile to that one that we made. So let's look at it. Sudo vi etc AppArmor.d user.bin.ss. And now, rather than just a whole bunch of blank spots, you can see down here, it has the correct syntax and the correct order and everything that we need in order to allow it to work. So here, all those things that we did, it created the correct permissions that it needs. And if we can get out of here, it should be active right away. Remember, it's still enabled. And so let's make sure that it's still enabled. So sudo aa status. And if we scroll up, 40 profiles are in enforce mode. And one of those in enforce mode is user bin ss. So we made those changes. And now the moment of truth, can we do ss-tuna? And we can, because we've allowed the things that it needs to use to do the tasks that we asked it to do. And we could lock it on. Let's say we didn't want it to be able to check for TCP. We could say, don't allow TCP, only UDP. That's a weird thing to want, but we could tweak that in the profile. And then this particular program, SS, would not be allowed to access TCP or UDP, whichever one I said. So you can lock it down per application, and making a brand new profile isn't even that difficult to do. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Now, I'm not going to go so far as to say that AppArmor is fun, but AppArmor I think is easier to grok than SELinux. Maybe it's not as powerful. I will go as far as to say that. Maybe AppArmor doesn't do as much and doesn't have as fine-grained whatever as AppArmor or as SELinux, but from a end-user standpoint, AppArmor is a lot easier to use, and it comes default in Ubuntu. So if you use a Red Hat thing, you're going to have SELinux. If you use Ubuntu based, you're probably going to have AppArmor. You can use either. You know, on a system, you could install AppArmor on a Red Hat system and disable SELinux and vice versa. But by default, that's usually what you'll see. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I mean, it's kind of nerdy stuff, but it's still a little bit of fun, at least for me. Thanks again to my Patreon supporters and for everyone. Remember to learn everything, do what you love, and most importantly, be kind. We'll see you in the next video.